Thank you for joining me tonight. Tonight, I'm talking about inclusivity in the workplace, specifically regarding women. To begin, I'll start with a little bit of a history of women in the workplace, and then we will move on to what I would like to include regarding women in the workplace and my method for that inclusion. So, women have been historically working in the home prior to 1900s, in and around the home, maybe on farmland surrounding the homestead, rearing children, educating children, and some cottage industries like textiles and pottery. As the Industrial Revolution came to be, um, 10 to 15% of women started working outside of the home, sometimes in another home as an employee of that home or doing piecework in factories. So 10 to 15% wasn't that much. It was majorly single women who had not been married yet. As World War I began, they moved further out of the home into working into factories and made their way into clerical occupations. By the 1920s, women made about 20% of outside work from the home. Mid-century, women made about half of the workforce. This was due in part of World War I and II, and more acceptance, some societal changes, in addition to the revenue they received from the income stream that hadn't been a thing prior to that. Over those years, there were some laws put into place to protect women in the workplace. Some of the more well-known ones were maybe the Equal Pay Act of 1963, Title VII, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, the Affordable Care Act, that's just to name a few. Coming into present day, women represent about 57% of the workforce in America. Here's where the exclusion comes in that I'm talking about specifically tonight. Although in the United States, women represent 57% of the workforce, only 29% are represented in senior leadership roles. So that's a pretty big discrepancy. It does not appear necessarily to be a class issue or an industry issue or an education issue, although some of that does play a part. That's not a driving force. It's not a new discrepancy, and it's not specific just to America. It's a worldwide discrepancy. There's been many theories about why it exists. Even though women have been a major part of the workforce for close to 100 years now. And as interesting as that research is, that would bring this presentation way out of scope. And it kind of dims, right? Why we got where we are. It's more important to shift where we need to be going. So my theory here is that it's necessary to narrow that gap and to bring more women into senior leadership. There's been a lot of research on why it's good for business. It fosters a more innovative, profitable organization. There's a lot of women who have a huge amount of spending power. So if you look at it from a consumer advantage point, women possess emotional intelligence and soft skill sets that their male counterpoints don't always have in senior leadership. And also it's more reflective of our customer and client base. So specifically, if I'm talking to you tonight as decision makers of our organization, for a little bit of background, I would use the example of a bank located in central Connecticut, where our customer base is split about 50-50 between men and women. However, our executive leadership team, these are senior vice presidents and above, the split is not 50-50. It is 83% male and 17% female. That is the mix holding and making up our executive leadership team. So, my goal for our organization would be to narrow that gap over the next 4 years. That would bring us to 2030. And here are some ideas for the method of how we could get there. One idea is mentorship. Mentorship has tons of qualities. I'm sure we're all familiar. In this institution, each year we go through and do staffing grids, right? It's part of our retention and our planning for people who are retiring and maybe phasing out of the business. We have high contributors, up and comers that we put in that right hand corner of our grid. So I would encourage our senior level managers to always be cognizant that we're making sure we're identifying females and making sure that the females are also included in that top right grid. And to pair them with a senior level person for at least a year to have a mentorship relationship, maybe even doing some goal setting with that person, hearing the stories of how that senior person came up in the organization, something like that. My second method would be an individualized division development plan. So not the individual necessarily making the plan, but the division making a plan. This would be done again by a senior level manager for each division, and would include 3 ways that they would be inspiring, aspiring, and supporting females in their division. Some examples of this support could be job shadowing with a female senior leader, connecting with a female community leader, and volunteer engagement at a women's shelter. Obviously female centered, but also showing role models and exposing that female employee to aspiring females, kind of supporting that whole growth mindset. My third method would be appointment, and this is where the rubber meets the road. The executive management team would be tasked with appointing a female leader to the team each year until the ratio of females and men is equal. This doesn't mean women who do not have the skill set or the want to be promoted are just put in that spot for a landmark. It would be women who want to be a leader and who have that growth mindset. But it would mean if by chance you ran out of an able-minded woman, you would need to draft an amendment to be voted by on our board of directors prior to filling that seat with a male. And this would be a conscious effort and a recorded choice that you have filled another seat of the executive management team with a male over a female. And hopefully over the next few years, we would be able to close that gap that we have right now. As a reminder, it's about 80 to 20%. So that's a pretty large gap. What you'll notice about these methods that I've presented is that it puts the onus on the management team, and these are the people who are in charge of promoting and hiring within the organization, and that's really where the change needs to begin. Thank you for your time, and have a great rest of your night.